Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hereby call to order this Central Committee meeting for today, Thursday, March 19, 2026. I would like to extend a cordial welcome to the members of the committee, the commissioner present, and to those in the public areas, and to the public following us via radio, Facebook, and other online platforms. This meeting of the Central Committee is duly convened in accordance with Article 8 of the Rules of Order of the Island Council Ordinance Committee. At this point, we have possibility for announcements. Are there any announcements from the Central Committee members present? No. Okay, Councilman Clyde Van Putten and also Council Lady Lopes-Panner are both absent from today's meeting with notice. Agenda point number 3. The published agenda reads as follows: 1, opening; 2, announcements; 3, setting of the agenda; 4, ratification list of incoming documents; 5, ratification list of decisions and commitments of 23rd February 2026. Agenda point number 6 is the Court of Audit 2025 Performance Audit on Permitting Issuance Process. Number 7 is TINAPA, a presentation on nature via the NEP program. Number 8, Environment Ordinance. Number 9, Announcement Executive Council. And number 10 is Closing. Are there any suggestions for additions, changes to the agenda? If not, then we will adopt the agenda as presented. Agenda point number 4, ratification list incoming documents. In the document received, you will find a list of incoming documents for the Island Council. Are there any comments on the list of incoming documents? Councilman Simmons.
Yeah, thank you. I notice there's an incoming document, but we use IBAPs, and I noticed some of the signatures are not blacked out. So it's namely there's a incoming internal 014-26 Island Council 2025-12-5 Base Nota, establishment of foundation for fundraising. And I noted in EBAPs the signatures are not. Yeah. And also there's another document, the signed RATS, it says signed RATS vote cell, wherever. I noticed there's a signature of the chairperson in a meeting that hasn't taken place yet. I believe that's a mistake, but just yes. So it's dated, I think, in May, and it's signed by.
Can you repeat which document it is? Number.
Okay, it's 014-26. IC 101525. And it says sign RATS vote stel besluit 007-835. So And all the way to the end, you could see the visitor sign it. It's blacked out. But I believe that was a mistake. I am assuming. And that's it.
All right, thank you, Councilman Simmons. The Rafir will take notes of your comments and make the necessary adjustments. Any other comments on the incoming documents? If not, then we will adopt the documents as presented. Agenda point number 5, ratification list of decisions and commitments, 23rd of February 2026. Are there any comments on this list of decisions and commitments from February 23rd? No. All right, then we will also adopt this document of decisions and commitments from our meeting of 23rd February. Agenda point number 6, Court of Audit 2025, Performance Audit on Permitting Issuance Process. For this agenda point, we will review the audit report from the Court of Audit on the permitting issuance process. The Court of Audit plays a role in strengthening the Island Council's oversight. The Court of Audit has conducted its audit for the year 2025, entitled Performance Audit on Permitting Issuance Process. This audit examines how permits are issued in St. Eustatius with a detailed review of the business license process under the Best Business Establishment Act. The aim of the audit is to provide the Island Council with a clear picture of how the process currently operates and to identify areas where improvements can support timely, consistent, and transparent decision-making. To gain further insight into the audit report, I will ask the Commissioner present if he would like to provide additional introduction to this agenda point, following which we'll have presentation, right, by the Court of Audit members. Commissioner Merkman, can you want to add anything to the introduction of this agenda point?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This, we know that the Court of Audit has been operating for some time on the island of St. Eustatius, and basically what you have indicated, that the Court of Audit looks at certain processes, or even they can even look at departments, how they are functioning, whether they are functioning according to their to the laws and policies that are involved in that department. And even the Island Council can even request that they look at a certain area or for research. So, and then they give they present their findings to the island, to the government, and then basically what happens is it is expected that corrective measures are taken. And I think it's a necessary instrument in the whole process, because it helps us when we portray ourselves to the rest of the world, that we are acting in a legal, transparent manner. And I think that's the biggest goal when it comes to the Court of Audit, that we are acting according to the laws and rules that govern our organization. And I think that the people that we have there now, they are well experienced, and so we have been getting good feedback from them, and they always cooperate with us in this area. Specifically, I'm now speaking on behalf of us in the Executive Council. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Merkman. All right, so at this time, I want to welcome the members of the Court of Audit that are joining us digitally online. So we want to welcome you again to our meeting of the Central Committee today to present the results of your 2025 Audit 2025 report with respect to the permitting process here on the island of Statia. So I give the word to Chairperson of the Audit Chamber. Good afternoon to you all.
Finish this audit cycle as we have done in previous year. At the end of
We have other presentations.
audit cycle, we present also to answer some of these questions. I also would like to pinpoint that every audit process that we have, we always have a member reporter or a member coordinator, and that is, in this particular audit, is Mr. Keith de Jong. The member coordinator or the reporter is the one that follows the audit process closer to make sure that the whole audit process goes as it should, in conjunction with the consultant and of course in conjunction with the rest of the members. So therefore there might be questions that Mr. Keith de Jong will probably be also more capable to answer some of your questions. Also, I would like to take this opportunity before I continue to again explain very shortly the mandate of the Court of Audit. This we do just to take the opportunity that maybe other individuals, the citizens of Statia, also tune into this meeting and also can learn more of what we do. So as a Court of Audit, we exercise the authority under the Public Entity Act, which is the WALBES, and also the ordinance established for the Court of Audit by the Island Council. In this mandate, it requires not only for the Court of Audit to examine whether resources are being used lawfully, but also whether government actions are carried out effectively, efficiently, and with due regard to integrity. It also involves assessing whether public administration provides value to citizens and supports effective governance. With that last mention, I'm going to start with the presentation of our audit, because the reason why we chose this topic is exactly that. It is the value that it can bring to the citizens and how it supports the governance. There is a presentation slides or a PowerPoint presentation that I shared. I don't know, Marjani, if you have that online or is being shown to the Central Committee?
Yes, we have the presentation on a separate screen. I wasn't speaking that song. Yes, so
the permitting process is very broad. Again, the reason why we chose this subject is because of its economic importance, the impact that it has to define opportunities to the citizens of Statia and everyone that actually exchanges with the permitting process. It has obviously social impact because it is, let's say, an easy way to interact also with the citizens directly, and they also get a fruit of these processes. It has operational importance because it is a translation or direct translation of how governance is working, and it has obvious public interest. This is the reason why we chose, after all careful exchange with the Island Council as well, with stakeholders, to choose a specific subject. When it comes to the scope of the audit, it started by review applicable legislation.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a little interruption in the digital transmission. So,
Immigration and utilities or used for maritime purposes and telecommunication. And you can also see that each permit type also has its own authority and its own regulation that supports it. So in general, the landscape of permits follow standards processes that includes, amongst other, that there is an application, that there is a review, there is a decision being made, that the permit is being granted and or denied. So these are very standard across all permits, but there are some differences, specifically when it comes to how the regulation is set up. Just to give you an example, the construction permit takes more time, and unlike a business license, after the legal deadline has been missed, that does not mean that automatically the permit is being granted. So in these small, let's say, conditions that are being regulated in the law is the difference between, let's say, the processes that each permit needs to undergo. However, we decided, as mentioned before, the focus to be the business license process. And the reason why we did is because we noted that there were a lot of concerns among citizens on social media, amongst others. Citizens describing that the system is unclear and slow, or that they are exceeding legal time frame without proper communication or clear communication, and finishing in statements such as a license should not take months, but days. We noted there were also other permits already being evaluated, such as the building or environment permits. That was done, I think, by the Inspectorate for Living Environment and Transport, LTI. They already had a report. So then we decided maybe it's better to choose a business, let's say a license process that has more contact with the citizens and has an impact, a greater impact and greater risk in terms of usage, and that in the past none of audits or reviews have been conducted. So what is the business license permits? Very quickly, as already mentioned, it is supported by the Business Establishment Act, Wetgast geen bedrijvenbest in Dutch, and this was established since October 10, 2010. The law forbids the establishment, operation, relocation, or modification of a business without first obtaining a license from the Executive Council. In short, anyone that wishes to engage with commercial or in commercial activities in St. Eustatius, whether as a sole proprietor, in Manzac, a partnership company, for example, a BD or NB, all must secure this type of permits. So when we decided to analyze the business license permit, we went to find out evidence from interviews. We processed observations, and these observations are basically a sample of the actual business licenses that were submitted and processed. And we structured review of 12 cases, which is a little bit more than half of the total. the total being 22 permits being processed in 2024, from which 12 cases have been reviewed. And from there, we analyze the root cause of potential or identified challenges encountered during those processes. So the next slide, you can see the process as it is by law, but also a mix of what is in practice. The flow chart that you see there is a bit different of the one of the report. It's the same, but different in the sense that in order for you to read it, I had to do it horizontal, because if I place it vertical, it will overflow over the slide. So, but in practice, it's the same as you will find on page 21 of the report. Just to summarize very quickly, so the applicant prepares an application, it submits the applications to the VTH unit, which is the license unit, the ENI, and from there, one officer does a completeness check. When the officer does a completeness check, two things can happen. They request a correction, other, let's say, information or missing information that the applicant needs to provide. And from there, once the applicant provides the information, the completeness check needs to start all over again. If the completeness check is okay, that means that the decision to grant the permit starts immediately within 8 weeks. From there, the VTH requests the Chamber of Commerce for advice, and it continues asking also advice from the Spatial Planning and Development Department or unit, and yeah, this is also processed based on the advisory files are being drafted, and at the end, the one that decides, or the authority that decides if this permit is granted or not, is the Executive Council. So what we have countered, some of the few things that we have countered in practice, is that, for example, in the submission, that sometimes certain documents or requirements or internal policies are not in place. For example, that there is no binding list of required documents for every type of business. That means that maybe one business provides one single page of a business plan, and another maybe have 10 pages of business plan. So there is no one specific criteria being established or used. Also, we noticed that when these are being reviewed, that there's only one licensed officer doing this, and there is no process or any policy that indicates once you need to review your application because you're missing some information. What are, let's say, the procedures or the documentations that needs to take place in this specific step. The same counts with the completeness check. It doesn't mention specifically what is considered complete or in terms of quality of documentation or quantity. These are some of the few things that we've noticed practically when it comes to the process. So basically, when it comes to what the law mentions, we could say that the public entity follows the overall sequence mandated by the BAS Establishment Act with the core steps implemented. So that's a good thing, that's very positive. However, we've noticed a few things that affect the timeliness and the transparency, which again is what is the highlight of what citizens are mentioning here. And the reason why we also chose this subject. So overall, the findings is that the case handling is largely manual and documentation practices vary, and this can, again, influence the timeliness of decision. There is no single system to track progress or deadlines. Also, advice is being asked from the spatial developments, and the question is of whether seeing the importance of the timeliness, especially when it comes to business, whether there are specific time frames to give advice or not, and often it has been identified that there are no time frames specified, which contributes to delays. And the law also includes a provision for automatic license issuance when deadlines are exceeded and these instances are not consistently published, meaning that after the 8 weeks the Executive Council should publish when the permit is granted. If not, it is being considered automatically as granted. And I think that is one of the most important findings as well. The findings also reflect the absence of clear internal policy and documented procedures, rather than shortcomings in staff effort or commitment. So again, in general, it's being carried out, but there are certain parts in the process which are causing delays and are causing also risks, such as mentioned before, not publishing these licenses that have been granted. From the Court of Audit, we recommend to reduce or prevent these shortcomings, to establish formal guidelines that would bring the process within 8 weeks as indicated by law. There are specific recommendations we provide to the Executive Council, but also to the specific department, such as to the Executive Council. We recommend consider developing an internal business license policy that translates the legal requirements in practical steps, so that it's more specified, so that everyone knows exactly what the roles are, when there are internal deadlines, and so on. Also, we recommend to consider mandating routine approvals to senior officials, because we do understand that with all the things that the Executive Council has on their plates, that this, let's say this little small step, it's little but still very important step, that this can be prevented if this can be mandated to someone else or a senior official, while still, of course, retaining the authority over the refusal cases. Another recommendation that was provided in the report is to consider review the purpose and scope of the Chamber of Commerce advisory role to reduce, again, the delays if advisory is not needed, or if it's needed, to be more specific, what the advisory entails. To the Directorate of E&I, in the Economy, Nature, and Infrastructure, we recommend strengthening the governance and internal controls by documenting procedures, formalizing the completeness criteria, adding simple review steps before files move forward, strengthening the communication with the applicants by providing standard confirmation and periodic status updates. And basically, these things are in place in the sense of there are existing cloud-based platforms that are being used, but they can be used more effectively as well by using this existing cloud-based platform to log the key milestones. For example, when a project was completed, if advice was requested, which decisions were made, and so on. At this point in time, we have concluded this is not properly centralized. With that said, that is, in short, a summary of our findings and recommendation when it comes to this specific audits. We again, as a Court of Audit, are very proud of this report once again. We wish that we could have gone through all the permits processes, but to have this as effective as possible, it was necessary to choose one of these permitting processes and dig deeper and find out what could be the root cause that probably could translate also in other permitting process. I want to thank Ms. Joan as well for her assistance during this process, and also our colleague Kida Young to follow this process thoroughly. If there are any questions, we are welcome to answer them.
Hello. Yes. Yes. Hello. Hello. Yes. Anyway, thank you, Mevrouw Lehing, for your presentation. Seems the Audit Chamber has done some extensive investigation on this topic. We will go into a deliberation of this agenda point. And as we say normally, we have discussions in 2 rounds. Unless there's a proposal, we will maintain the regular speaking time. I suggest that the members make their presentations and ask all your questions that can be noted, and then the members of the audit chamber can answer the questions at the end. Okay? We will start with Island Council member Derek Simmons in this first round of deliberation.
Yeah, thank you. I have very few questions. I have a question concerning the recommendation to the Executive Council. You use the word in the second recommendation mandating the word senior official. I'm 100% for mandating the work, but I'm very cautious of using the word seniority. To me, it should have to do with expertise. Once you have the knowledge, to me, that is what counts. And to follow up, I think also the refusal process should be mandated to the person that has the expertise. The reason why is sometimes I think we got caught up with these because it's by the Executive Council, and then it's stuck there with probably persons who basically is not experts. And then what happens is there's a very lengthy discussions that sometimes don't make sense because they just don't understand. So you put the work by who can do the work, and basically they will know why something should be refused or not, and do it in a professional matter. So that was basically my question based on that that recommendation, and that's the only thing I had. I must applaud you all for your research. I think it was well put together and understandable, and it could be followed, I believe, by the someone who has no knowledge of how things work. To me, it also explains how the process works, and I hope persons are paying keen attention, especially those that wants to go in business and know what needs to be done. Because often persons do not, they want to start up a business and don't know where to start. And I think once they understand the process, it can help them find a way in establishing, businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Simmons. Council Lady Raquel Spanakati.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Chairman. Ms. DeCourt said she's proud of the report that they present, and I agree. I concur that it's an extensive, comprehensive report, interesting read, especially the topic chosen. I think for the listening audience, it is good for us to emphasize that the Court of Audit is an instrumental tool that helps the government to be critical of their own functioning. It is not just to bash or criticize, for lack of a better word. The audit shows that on page 23 that 0 files were issued, or 0 permits were issued in the 8-week period. That is very concerning. This leaves the government vulnerable and open for legal action. And I wonder if this is just administrative when it is at 0. That is very poor. And it shows just that systematically we are failing legally. I was wondering if the Executive Council in this case Commissioner Merkman, if there are any concrete steps taken to ensure that the 8-week legal deadline is being met going forward, as we haven't met it as yet. I'm also wondering, when will internal deadlines for each advisory step be formalized and communicated, and how we will monitor compliance. Page 23, again, the audit confirms that the permitting process relies heavily on institutional memory and informal practices. This again makes us vulnerable, prone to inconsistency and inefficiency. When we mess with people's business and their permits, we mess with livelihoods. Persons are dependent, sometimes have people employed that also dependent by extension. I was wondering, Commissioner, when will a formal written business policy, license policy, sorry, be submitted so that the IC can review? And what is the timeline for developing standard operating procedures at the VTH unit? And is there any kind of insurance that staff are trained and that procedures are consistently applied? Page 24. Do I need to wait, Commissioner?
No,
yeah? Okay. Yeah, okay. On page 24, it regards the spatial development, the SPD. It says that it's a major source of delay. The Chamber of Commerce advises often duplicate checks already done at registration. And the Executive Council's weekly agenda cycle adds additional delay. How will we reduce the dependency on SPD for routine cases or ensure the advice is delivered within a fixed time frame? What changes will you make to ensure that permit decisions are not delayed by agenda scheduling? On page 12, the third paragraph, the law requires publication when a permit is granted by operation of law. The audit shows that this is not happening, which is a breach of transparency obligations. Now, Ms. DeCourt briefly touched on this during her presentation as well. And I'm asking the Executive Council, why has the publication requirement not being followed? What system will be put in place to ensure automatic approvals are published within the legal time frame? And can the Council receive a list of all cases where the deadline was exceeded in the past? Again, it's a grave concern if businesses automatically are granted permits, or should be by default, because if there are issues, then at that time, the business can legally continue. Page 26, there is no digital workflow, no deadline tracking, and no escalation mechanism. Again, this is on us as a government and not a staffing issue. The public entity already has cloud tools, yet they are not being used for process controls. Is there any idea of when we will have a tracking system implemented? Will applicants receive automated status updates, as that is also not being done? And how will you ensure that delays in one department do not stall the entire process? Page 23. This is a known issue over the years within government, where we have one person doing something. The process is then vulnerable because too much knowledge and responsibility sit by one person. And this is a risk to continuity, quality, and also fairness. We must admit all of us have a bias. My question is, what is your plan to distribute responsibilities across multiple staff members? Will you introduce a sort of vier-ogen principe, a sort of peer review, second pair of eyes, before decisions go to the Executive Council? And how will you ensure continuity when there is vacation or emergencies and that one staff member is unavailable? The audit made it clear that improvements are within our control. That is the unfortunate thing when you read this report. There are not things that we cannot change. The council must ensure that the Executive Council moves from ad hoc fixes to systemic reform. Question to the Executive Council: do you have a timeline to implement some of these recommendations from the audit? Please inform us which recommendations will be prioritized in the next quarter, and also why. And how will we as a council be informed of your progress, and how often? To summarize, I feel that the audit report, it did not point out a lack of effort by staff. It points to a lack of structure, policy, and internal control. And as a member of the Island Council, I hope that this is taken up as urgent as it goes to our transparency as a government. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Council Lady Spanakati. Okay, I have a few questions of my own. I think when we made a suggestion for this topic to be discussed, I think I had presented a practical case of a business that had been trying to get a permit for holding of events, and the process took so long that the entrepreneur decided to just forget about the whole thing and eventually close the business. I understand that this pertained to an authority that resides with the governor, so a matter of public order, and I understand is that you did not look into that specific area of decision making within the governor's cabinet that deals with issues relating to public order, because this had to do with a permit for like holding dances and parties, noise pollution in the area, those type of things. So I just want to confirm that you did not look into that area at all, and if that could be a topic for a future investigation by the audit chamber, looking specifically at the role of the governor and her cabinet in permitting process. Also, businesses get a business permit, but for specific types of business, you also need a specific operating permit after investigations like by the brandweer or the public health department for restaurants, hindrance permits in case you want to open a garage, etc. So that's additional, I think that's an additional permit that is requested. Did you look into that area at all? Or I think that falls maybe outside the scope of this particular investigation and how that process goes. Yeah, so how long people still have to wait for that operational permit after they get the general business license. In your recommendation, I did not see, perhaps if I read well, I did not see any specific recommendation like to invest in digitalization of the whole permitting process. Can you maybe indicate if that is something you would recommend that can speed up the processes, also that applicants can, look online and follow the process themselves as to where their documents are lying or heading. On the issue of mandating and second review by a second set of eyes, have you heard? Are you recommending that this should happen, this should be done by someone within the VTH department, or you recommend it's best to do it by someone outside of the department? Someone, as my colleague here says, with the necessary expertise and knowledge who can do that. So should this second review be done internally at VTH or outside? And then a final question I have, when permits are issued, I mean, I think regular business permits might seem routine, but when permits are issued, do they or should they pass through the legal affairs department to get a legal review? Is that part of the process now, or would you say that that is not necessary? Thank you. Those are my questions, and so we will give you the opportunity now to answer the questions in this first round of deliberation. Commissioner, you have some? Okay, Mevrouw de Kort, you can go ahead with the answering of the questions. Are you hearing me?
Yes, thank you,
Yes.
Smith. I try my best to make a summary or list of all questions. I might go to one and jump to another. I would like to start first with the question of Councilman Simmons, in which was mentioned about the recommendation of allowing a senior officer to basically do the granting of the business license on behalf of the Executive Council. I believe here what we wanted to state, of course, is when we use the term seniority, it's more that it's someone that is doing it on behalf of the Executive Council, and with that said, it is important to understand the importance of the work that is being done. Of course, I understand that it's not necessary that it needs to be someone that understands or has a certain expertise, but it is important for the person to know what the work entails. That means that, as you can see, and I think Council Lady Spanner mentioned it, and she hit the hammer on the head very quickly when she referred to the decision within 8 weeks. When you see the table, there are 0 compliant files. So what we were trying to say there is that that 0 is a risk, in the sense that we don't know if those business licenses were, let's say, compliant and legally that they were granted, or they're automatically granted because there was no answer. So that we don't know. But what we know is that the law mentions that after those 8 weeks, they get the permit. So to solve that, the reason why we are referring to someone else is that if the reason is that because of the different tasks that the Executive Council has to do, other permits that they have to approve, for example, that if it is so that, let's say, for example, 99% of the applications are likely to be granted, then someone else can do that. And maybe the refusals, which maybe are the small cases, that this can be, is more of a work of the Executive Council to go more in depth in indicating what the reason for refusal. I do understand that maybe expertise might be necessary, but that would be a call of the Executive Council. Again, as Council Lady Spanner mentioned, the main or the key finding of this audit is the 0 that is mentioned in the decision within 8 weeks, meaning that this decision never took place, but that does not mean that they were not granted by law. And that is something that needs to be highlighted and needs to be considered. Again, we provided different recommendations, and it's important to mention that the Court of Audit's recommendations are not binding in the sense that it's just provides examples or guidance to the Executive Council of what they have to or can think of. But of course, in practice, in the execution, there are other, let's say, solutions that as Executive Council are also effective, such as maybe what Chair Smith mentioned, the digital tools that can be used to make everything more efficient. So it is a recommendation to provide different examples of how to make it more efficient to solve these issues, but that does not mean that those are the only solutions possible for the challenges that we have presented. With that said, I do think that the other questions were addressed to the commissioner. So Ivan, I think I covered all the questions. I see Keith also, you can elaborate more on the answers? Go ahead.
Thank you, Lane, for your answers as well. I think you're spot on as well. I just wanted to mention, as lead rapporteur, and thank you for the opportunity to speak here, just to highlight that I was fortunate enough to do this audit together with Joan, who is also an accredited auditor, InterSci auditor. And maybe it was not very clear from the presentation, but I do want to say this. The cooperation during this audit was really exemplary, especially from the unit licenses. And it's honestly, in my 15 years that I've been doing this, not very often that I go into a department and the sample files are ready, organized, and ready for us to review. And I think that says also a lot about the unit, how the unit works. We also received a response from the Executive Council on time, and their input really helped to strengthen the audit. If you look at the overall picture, we do believe that with a relatively small and some practical changes, the permitting process, and especially then the business license part, can improve. And then, I mean, not only for the public, but also in terms of efficiency and effectiveness. And just to say, if the department or the Executive Council wants to move forward with drafting a policy, obviously we are available to have that conversation. We won't tell you what to write, but I do think we can add value by explaining what we found and how our recommendations could work in practice.
Does that cover all the questions? Commissioner Merkman. I mean, from the audit chamber members, is that all the answers you have? Okay, Commissioner
Only
Merkman.
one small comment I would like to make in addition to what was already mentioned. When we refer to senior member, we are actually talking about organizational seniority and not necessarily seniority in terms of years of service, for example. I think that's an important distinction.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Merkman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think what was presented today is a step in a good direction for all of us, because we had a meeting presentation to discuss these findings also in February, and we definitely agree with the proposals that were made, because some of the things that we would like to see is more training and diversification within the process. And within the Executive Council, within the government structure, there's a 2 weeks time frame for advice. So if let's say if something comes in or whatever, goes to VTH, they send it to a department, and technically the understanding is that you have 2 weeks to respond to that. And at times, what happens with the business permit doesn't really have any delays within VTH. Is when they send it out for advice, it sometimes doesn't come back within the allotted time frame. We are within the Executive Council, along with VTH, have conducted a review of that process, and there are certain findings that have came out where the stagnation actually occurs. We find, in our estimation, within the Executive Council, the workers at VTH take their work very seriously and are very professional in dealing with whatever comes their way. You know, so I would like to applaud them publicly for their work. The automatic granting of permit is a concern for us, as mentioned by Council Lady Spanner, because after 8 weeks, technically, somebody can just have the right to open a business, and without controls, you know, and really having that review involved, it can be quite dangerous, you know. So it's something that we also would like to have this process as streamlined as possible, and we, as I indicated, we are looking at that right now. A tracking system, as was mentioned, is something that would be good. The unit manager, when he came by me, he indicated it would be good also. We have something like that where if before it reaches something that we could have when it comes to publication, that there's a sign given that it needs to be published again, you know, to maybe to GI in collaboration with GIS. So those are some of the things that we are looking at. When we realize that within our small structure, we have some limitations when it comes to if somebody fall out. But what happens at that time, the unit manager then steps in and try to, if the person is really incapable, then it really falls on his plate. But if in any way the person can function, the unit manager at that time works along with that worker to try to expedite the process still. And you referred to it, there's a timeline for reforms. I'm looking at the unit manager now. I don't really recall that we have a timeline for reforms, but it is something that we have been concerned about for quite some time. I think those are some of the questions that were posed by Council Lady Spanner. And pertaining to what Councilman Simmons relate pertaining to the process coming to lay by a senior civil servant, I think he's also speaking from his experience as a commissioner. And I think when something comes into the Executive Council, it's very rare that we don't follow the advice from the departments when it comes in. So, you know, maybe it might be a good thing if it ends up by a senior civil servant that they check that the process was properly done. But again, it's something that is the Hudanigheid of the Executive Council. Thank you. I do have a document here from discussion, the point of review, that was from when we actually looked at it in February. And if the council is interested in seeing that document, I can submit that to the registrar's office. It says, what the name of it is? Discussion VTH 2026 Executive Council discussion pointers. So if you all are interested, I can submit that. It goes into some of the questions that were posed in this meeting. Thank you.
Okay, if you can share that via the Griffier office, and we will receive that. Okay, is there a need for further discussion, another round discussion on this topic? Around, you have a question?
Thank you, Chairman. appreciate the fact that Commissioner Merkman understands the questions and the concern from the council. I, however, feel some questions were insufficiently answered. Like I said, I can respect the fact that you're stating that the delay is not always caused by the unit, but my question was, how will you monitor compliance with these deadlines? It doesn't matter where it lies, but it remains within government, and we need to start to do better. So I just would want to hear any plans or efforts in that regard. Also, policies developed that can aid in that area. You know, a business license policy. Yeah. I thought I had a loud voice. Okay. And my final question that I feel I really would appreciate an answer on is, you mentioned that a unit manager would replace an employee in absence, but I feel that does not answer the vier-ogen principle. It is vital that someone looks at the things that you do. Just because, forgetting bias, we are human. We can miss things, and it is always good if somebody else looks along with you. So, and like I said, it keeps us from being vulnerable and having legal processes because of mistakes.
Thank you, Council Lady. Commissioner Merkman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think to elaborate a little bit more on what we meant with that is when the unit manager, any document that is done by a policy worker is checked by the unit manager, and then when that is done, it is forwarded to E&I, and they also check it. So there's more than four open principle when it comes to that. But I agree with you too, it would provide more transparency if you have a policy dealing with this. So it's documented so everybody can go and check. And you don't have to depend on word of mouth as to what's happening. Yeah. One of the pointers is that, as you accurately point out, that we are looking at making a policy in that area, and that is in the document from the Executive Council. Yeah. And I'm not trying to minimize the seriousness of when you have a request for a permit, because I mean people have sometimes their whole existence, their whole future hanging on something like that, you know, and there's a lot of money and effort at times hanging on it. So I'm not trying to minimize that, because I was on the other end of the stick sometime in the past already, and it's not a nice place to be, especially when you send in a request, and then sometimes you don't even, in the past I know I've said put in requests and I didn't get any answered, and it's quite frustrating. So it does have our serious concern, but we have duly identified where the stagnation takes place. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Merkman. So I take it there's no more need for further discussion on this topic. All right, is there anything else from the audit chamber members?
I do think we have had a great discussion, I think, this afternoon. I really want to thank the Island Council members, the Central Committee, for really providing us with sharp feedback and questions. I really, and I talk here on behalf of the Court of Audit, we really appreciate the questions that were posed during this meeting. It was really sharp, and we can really see that you went through the report and took your time to make use of the report, because there's a reason why we do it as well, as a tool for the Island Council members to use and to be sharp when it comes to the government. At the same time, I would like to also indicate that if you look at so every process that we have, when we finish our report, we have a draft and we ask the Executive Council for a response. That is just part of our standard process, and we want to thank and acknowledge the Executive Council as well, because I think it's a matter of finding that process that we do standard. The previous audit we did not get a response, but we are happy that this time we did receive a response from the Executive Council on time, and not only on time, they acknowledge the bottlenecks, and we're very open on the recommendations. And of course, in the future we will have our progress meters that you already know every 2 years, where we can go back and again review whether these recommendations were considered or not. But again, we want to acknowledge as well that we received the response from the Executive Council on time this time as well. Before I finish, I don't know if maybe, Joan, since you were part of the process, that you would like to maybe summarize in a bit what is your experience, as you were very close to the data collection.
Thank you, Chair, the court, and also the members of the Court of Audit, and of course the honorable members of the Island and Executive Council of St. Eustatius. I can be very short. It was a very efficient process, generally because the communication was good between the Court of Audit and myself as the advisor, and the various departments as well as the Executive Council. As Rapporteur de Jong indicated, it was a pleasure to work with people that provided you with the information. Follow-up information was provided, and I must say I felt that the persons working in the various departments, particularly for the business license, were very open and honest about the processes they were using, and also their willingness and actually desire to improve the process, because they recognize the shortcomings and the gaps. They are very committed. They are also, I would say, quite resilient and quite creative to come up with what they have, despite not having, for example, formal, how we say, or manuals. But I think, as De Jong said, the fixes are not that hard. It's just a question of following through and providing them with the tools. They are willing and able and committed to improving the process, because they understand their forward and front-facing responsibility to the public. So all in all, a very good audit, and I think an audit that can have impact if the recommendations are followed up with.
Thank you, Joan. On behalf of the Court of Audit, again, thank you once again for having us. And soon in the coming weeks, we will also submit our annual report of 2025. With that said, I think we have covered everything from our side, I believe. Thank you.
All right, thank you, members of the Audit Chamber, for your report and the information shared with us today, and also to Commissioner Merkman for his answers. Thank you very much, and look forward to hearing from you again soon. Okay, I will also ask the committee now if I guess we can forward this report to the Island Council for further processing. Okay. All right, so committee indicating that it can move to the Island Council for further action. We now go into agenda point number 7. It is a presentation by the St. Eustatius National Parks Foundation, STINAPA, on nature via the NEP program. This agenda point concerns an informative presentation from STINAPA. The presentation focuses on nature through the NEP program, which stands for Nature and Environment Policy Program. To provide further context on this agenda point, I will now give the word to Commissioner Merkman to give any additional information on this agenda point.
Mr. Chairman, this is an agenda point that has many tentacles when you look at it that affects all of our community. The NEP program, and specifically, I would like to thank Mr. Bowman for coming into this meeting to present what and to give us some information on what they're actually doing with reforestation in combating of invasive species and coral reefs. Those are very important ingredients to where we want to develop Statia. And I hope that, and I know that it will help enlighten the populace of Statia when it comes to what the NEP program is about and the benefit it has for nature. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Merkman. So now we invite Mr. Bowman to make his presentation on the NEP program for Statia. Mr. Bowman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
It's on the mic.
Okay.
Okay, we're just getting the presentation ready, so a little patience. Okay, I think we're ready. Go ahead, Mr. Bowman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Island Council members. Thank you for having me here and present the NEP projects under STINAPA. So there's importance of the islands to actually build on the nature infrastructure, and healthy ecosystems can protect and support tourism, fisheries, coastal protection, and local livelihoods. And the degradation of these will threaten these benefits. So a few of the key environmental challenges, and the reason that we have these projects is that the projects try to combat erosion and sedimentation, vegetation loss, excess nutrients, pollution, invasive species, and disease. And these pressures threaten both nature and the island's economic resilience. Can I have the computer? Okay, so at Stanapa we have 3 NPP projects out of the 12 on Statia in total. And the first one is the coral reef restoration project, which started in 2023. The invasive species and habitat restoration project, which also started in 2023. And the reforestation project, which under NEP started in 2024, but already has been underway under a EU funded project and also a BASITCA funded project. So the original project started already in 2018. And together these projects aim to restore ecosystems and strengthen the island's resilience. We start with the coral reef restoration project. So the project objective is to reverse the decline in coral reefs around St. Eustatius and support the recovery of healthy ecosystems and improve coastal protection, coastal fisheries, recreation and tourism, and of course habitat for biodiversity. And this is a response to the decline in hard coral cover over the last decades. So we have a downward trend. This downward trend follows our sister island Saba and also St. Kitts. It's a general trend throughout the entire Caribbean. And we've gone from a coral cover of roughly 30% to now around 2% in total. And corals are living animals, and they form the essence of what builds up the reef. So without them, the reef slowly decline in height and then eventually become only rubble. So how do we restore the coral reefs? Well, one issue is algae. So algae is something that has been increasing over the last decades in response to several things, but one thing is the decline in herbivores that feed on algae on the reef. So what we're going to do is we're going to culture sea urchins, which in a land-based facility at Kingswell, which we have set it up there now. And we're going to reintroduce them on the reef, where they're going to control the algae growth and reduce the amount of algae on the reef to allow for natural recovery of the corals, the hard corals in particular. We're also aiming to explore if we can use sea urchins in aquaculture as a way to support the restoration efforts financially, but also see if we can use this to diversify the fishery sector. And that is a more long-term exploratory goal. And we know this can work for the reefs on Statia. So on the left-hand side, you have a deeper reef on Statia where there is a massive amount of algae. Most of what you can see there is algae. There's a few lighter, smaller spots which are hard coral. On the right-hand side is a shallower reef outside in the bay. And all the green in that picture is coral. So there's a much higher coral cover in the right picture compared to the left one. And the reason is we have sea urchins there. So there are a few sea urchins on the right-hand side, and they clean the rock so coral can grow without being smothered by the algae. So we aim to simulate this or mimic this natural occurrence also on the deeper reefs and help the reef out. So the first species that we're going to use is Diadema antillarum, which is the long-spined sea urchins. And we're going to culture sea urchins in the lab at Kingswell. We're going to grow them from larvae to juveniles in controlled conditions, and then outplant them on the coral reefs on the deeper section, so below 5 meters. This will, the sea urchins will then naturally remove the algae and help the coral reef to recover. So we have already now cultured Diadema sea urchins from larvae to juveniles. We actually successfully managed to breed sea urchins just last week, which was a milestone as well. So we have now built up the technical expertise in restoration and aquaculture. We completed genetic studies in the Diadema sea urchins to see where they come from and how the genetic diversity looks in the wider Caribbean, and that was a collaboration with other actors in the Caribbean, mainly Saba. We collected cellulars to see where the sea urchin larvae come from, and we successfully raised these cellulars in the laboratory setting. For infrastructure development, we have acquisition of Kingsville National Park Center, where we have established a temporary laboratory. We've also developed a microalgae culture system, which is basically a food production for the sea urchins, which is very important in this process. We've designed and put out a tender for a modern marine laboratory as of 2 weeks ago. And we created opportunities for research, learning, and education, but also for tourism. As we start getting more and more interest for the lab, we have more and more tours of the lab, and also tourists come through there. And with this, Stenapa is developing into a regional leader in reef restoration. So this is just a snapshot of the sea urchin culture cycle. So we go and we collect the male and female sea urchins, adults from the reef. We take them in and give them a hot bath, which sort of stimulates the release of gametes. And when we find males and females, they release their gametes, and then we have in the middle picture a larvae. So they, after a couple of months, settle, and then on the right-hand picture, they sort of start looking like a very, very tiny sea urchin. So this is what it looks like in the lab. There's a lot of microscopy going on, especially in the juvenile phases, where we have to count the sea urchins, and when we look and see when they're ready to be outplanted in or moved to the aquarium when they settle. And this is what the equipment looks like. There's a lot of tanks that allows us to go through the entire cycle. This is the new equipment that we're waiting on that is currently in Florida, which will be here in the next couple of weeks, we hope. So in 2-3 months, everything should be set up, and we are looking forward to have the general public, but also the Island Council, come and visit us again when we have this set up. The lab gives us a lot of education opportunities. We've had several groups of school children come through the lab, and hopefully this will spark interest in this line of work and allow at least a few Statia kids to be interested, and then hopefully educate themselves in this field and come back and start working at Stenapa at some time in the future. So the project continuation, we are going to, as I mentioned, install the new cultural equipment and scale up production, and with that begin outplanting of the sea urchins on the deeper reefs. We are going to expand the marine lab operations with a new laboratory. We hope to secure additional funding, and we're looking at EU projects in particular. When this has been established, we also are going to look to other herbivore species, such as trypnosis, which is also a commercial food product that could be used to explore sustainable funding through aquaculture of the species. The second project is the Invasive Species Control and Dry Forest Restoration Project, and the objective of this project is to restore native forests by controlling invasive species, protecting native wildlife, and preventing the loss of critical species such as the bridal quail dove, which is the dove on the picture there. So the project relevance, well, forest that degrade threatens biodiversity, but also landscape quality and tourist potential. And healthy forests support bird watching and hiking tourism, ecotourism, climate resilience, and wildlife habitat. Invasive species, which is a great threat to agriculture and fisheries, but also indirect to tourism and ecosystems directly. So a few of the key actions that has gone through this project is that we identify a few key habitats on the quill where the bridal quail dove can be found in abundance or in some numbers. After the hurricane in 2017, the bridal quail dove population decreased from roughly 3,000 individuals to now less than 50. So it's been a sharp decrease, and one of the issues is the habitat quality. So what we've done is we've fenced in 10 hectares on the quill to exclude invasive species, but also grazers, to improve the habitat and boost the population. We're also conducting quite a lot of invasive species control. One of the most critical species here is the green iguana, top left picture. Green iguana comes with construction material usually, but also through containers from mainly St. Martin. The green iguana threatens not only our native iguana, but also agriculture, because it will eat pretty much anything. Until in 2025, we removed roughly 5 individuals that came from St. Martin. Other species that we're focusing on is the Cuban tree frog on the right, which came to Statia through plant import, and it's quite a large one, so it's roughly 4 inches, and it eats everything that is smaller than itself. That includes birds, our native lizards, native frogs, etc. So it threatens not only wildlife, but it can have a big impact on tourism as well. Up until today, we've removed roughly 90 individuals, and we have removed thousands of eggs and spawn. In December, or since December, we have not had any more animal spawn, which means that we have successfully started to control the population, and we hope within the next couple of years they will be able to eliminate the population completely. But it's an ongoing project. Other species that we control, of course, rats. On the quill we removed more than 1,000 rats using humane rat traps. We're also looking into, together with LVV and other actors like the health department, to see what we can do about the snail, and we're continuously removing lionfish, which threatens the marine ecosystem. A key part of this is the prevention of new invasive species. This is something that we are collaborating with OLE on. We don't have monkeys on the island, we don't have mongoose, but it's crucial that we prevent them from coming in and establishing. Getting monkeys onto the island would be a significant or have significant impact on the agriculture sector, but also for normal people's everyday life. They want to get mango from a mango tree. That is quite difficult if you have a large amount of monkeys on the island. One of the projects they were working on together with OLE is advising on the biosecured fence for the new harbor, which will hopefully start in the near future. We're also advising and working together on preventing illegal animal export. This was a situation last year which a individual tried to smuggle out more than 70 native lizards. A good collaboration with local authorities, OLE, etc., prevented this from happening. So project continuation, well, we're going to continue to remove invasive species such as the Cuban tree frog. We're going to continue the recovery of protected forest ecosystems and recovery of endangered species such as the bridal quail dove, and hopefully get a full recovery of that species in the future. That will increase biodiversity and strengthen the ecosystem resilience, and also improve opportunities for industries such as ecosystems going forward. The last project is the reforestation project, and the objective here is to restore vegetation along coastlines and degraded areas while supporting food production, education, and climate resilience. So, one of the relevancies for reforestation, why it's needed, is that we are currently experiencing a loss of vegetation, and loss of vegetation increase erosion, sedimentation runoff into the sea, which damages coral reef and fisheries. Coastal erosion also affects infrastructure and our historical sites, such as the historical site on the left bottom picture, and degraded landscapes reduces tourism potential in the long run. So a few key activities. We plant native species or naturalized species, but focus mainly on native species and shrubs in priority areas. These areas have been determined by and approved by OLE. All other areas that we plant on are private and then in agreements with private landowners. Up until today, we planted or donated more than 6,000 trees, and roughly 60% of those trees that we've planted are edible species, which include sea grapes, mango, soursop, sugar apple, cashew, Suriname cherry, moringa, breadfruit, etc., just to mention a few, but the list goes on. We don't do this all by ourselves, but in collaboration with actors such as Made in Statia, Elevate, Statia Pride, local schools, but also the Cancer Foundation. And a few key project activities. We have, if you go down to Zealandia, you can see a few of our plots close to the coastline, and the planting there is with the aim to stabilize that coastline and to reduce the erosion of our coastline. We also have established food forests and agroforestry plots at our reforestation site. We've supported urban tree planting and beautification throughout the island, and we're also expanding nursery capacity and water infrastructure. So a few of the impacts, well, when these areas are allowed to grow up, we can reduce erosion, which reduces sedimentation onto the reef, which causes healthier coral reefs. And with that planting of fruit trees to increase local food production, improve local landscape, and eventually have a greater climate resilience. The project continuation, we aim to expand the coastline reforestation. This is highly dependent on land availability. We also continue the pilot food forest plot and agroforestry plot at the nursery site. We continue urban tree planting and beautification, and we're expanding the nursery and water infrastructure. We'll also start realigning reforestation activities with future goals of OLE and other partners when it comes to climate change, agriculture ambitions, etc. So it's a living project that changes on the needs of the island. And finally, these projects are investment in the nature of Statia, and it strengthens the nature of Statia. And these projects will restore forests and coral reefs, protect biodiversity, eventually also strengthen tourism potential and economic growth, support sustainable agriculture, and increase climate resilience. So investing in these projects for now and for the future will strengthen the economy of Statia and protect its nature. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bowman, for your presentation. Okay, committee members, follow the same procedure. If you have questions, you ask your questions, and at the end we will answer Mr. Bowman can answer all the questions. So we begin with Councilman Derek Simmons in the first round of deliberation. So, Mr. Bowman, you can note the questions as.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I believe investing in nature is very important because I guess too we are part of nature. I have a question concerning the birds. I know this, for example, you have this, we refer to them as the ground dove.
The ground dove?
Yeah. And why notice in town you see a lot of certain type of dove. Is that, are they like increasing because they aren't much, they aren't being controlled? Because you don't see much different species dove. You just see like a whole bunch of one type of dove. My concern is because when I'm talking about from when I was small, you used to see a lot of the guan dove, and now you're seeing a different type of dove. Is that a natural process, or you know, how did that occur? Yeah, that's.
Okay, thank you. So you're able to note the questions? Okay. All right, thank you, Councilman Simmons. Council Lady Spanner Carty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Mr. Bowen, for your presentation. We indeed got a tour of the sea urchin breeding area. I was curious to know how many make a difference, and then if you have a goal in mind, and how many did you carry out now? I also was curious, I couldn't recall if the day of the presentation you told us what caused the decline in their existence. And mainly this led to my second question, which is in general speaking, but especially as it regards the urchins, is there anything that a community can do to assist or to contribute and get involved in areas? You know, we always say we want to leave something for the generations to come, and our nature is something that we would like to preserve. So I'm curious to know, is there any kind of, you know, low engagement involvement for our community to aid in any of these areas?
Thank you, Council Lady Spanner. I have two questions. You mentioned about the invasive iguana species. So I would like to know what is the state of our local iguana. So are they adequately being protected? Is the invasive species, what damage are they causing? And I think those were mostly up in the bovine area. So if you can give an indication, how is that population doing at this time? And with respect to the NEP program, is there a time frame for this NEP program? How many years does it still have to go, or is this a continuing program? Okay, so you may answer these questions from the first round of discussion.
Thank you for the questions. First question, the change in dove species that are visible is mainly related to the change in the habitat and also seasonal. We have also had a non-native dove species come into the Caribbean, which you can see, it's a light ground dove that you see quite often. It does compete with our native species, and as that increases, it does take resources from our native species and causes them to reduce. Depending on what's happening on the island in general, how the habitat for these doves, for example, the bridal quail dove on the quill, you will only find them on the quill. It's only in the quill where the habitat is suitable for this dove species. And when that changes, you will also have changes in the distribution of these bird species. So it may be so that in the past there were more fruit trees in town, there were more trees in general in town. As that changes due to hurricanes, etc., we have a shift in population dynamics and distribution, and they move out to other areas or completely disappear from some areas. So it's difficult to say exactly what the cause is of your observations or the councilman's observations, but that's the general sort of how it functions. Regarding the sea urchins, currently we have not outplanted any sea urchins. It has been, in the last couple of years, we built up the capacity and the infrastructure to be able to do this. And only 2 weeks ago, we were able to successfully breed sea urchins. So it's a work in progress, and the temporary lab is being built up. We will have the equipment coming in from Florida in a couple of weeks. And when that is fully established, we'll be able to upscale the production of sea urchins drastically from a couple of dozen to thousands. We will need to outplant tens, if not hundreds of thousands of sea urchins in the end to restore the population on the reef. Before the die-off of sea urchins in the late 80s, there was a disease that went through the entire Caribbean, and within a couple of months, the sea urchin population had been reduced by more than 99%. And in a healthy ecosystem, you can have 1 sea urchin per square meter. And if you look at how many square meters we have on the reefs around Statia, there's a lot of sea urchins that need to be outplanted. However, we hope that by outplanting sea urchins in selected areas that they can naturally establish, get a foothold, and from there spread through the areas around it. So we don't expect to outplant 1 sea urchin per square meter of reef. Regarding what the public can do and be engaged, we welcome anyone that wants to volunteer within our projects. I believe that OLE are making great progress in terms of the environmental standards. I am aware that you are going to discuss the environmental ordinance in just a few minutes. That will also strengthen the sort of conditions for these species. It will regulate how much you can put out in the ocean, which helps the community, or the reef community, sea urchins, etc. So that is a great step forward. How you build, if you plant on your cliff, if you build a septic tank instead of a cesspit, all these things help the reef and supports a healthy ecosystem. Regarding the local iguana, the local iguana is still in relatively low numbers. The last population estimates put them between 300 and 500. It should be said that Statia is the last island in the Caribbean, and therefore in the entire world, that has a population that is not mixed with other species. So with the green iguana that come in from St. Martin that has a striped tail. So it's really the last stronghold. The iguana population in Boven is very low. There used to be a high population in Boven many years ago. However, that population, due to habitat decline, has almost disappeared. We did a survey in Boven last year, and we do find iguanas there, but they are in very low numbers. There should be that the bovine should be able to sustain a much, much higher population density than it is. So if the area recovers and the habitat becomes a bit better, I expect that the area will be flourishing in the distant future. Regarding the number of years that the NEP, this was a 10-year project from the beginning, stemming or ranging from 2020 to 2030. However, I'm just speaking from what I know. I'm not deeply involved in the political processes in the Netherlands, I must say. There is funding for our projects until the end of this year. That is also why we're looking into alternative funding from the EU for projects that can be funded through there. We hope that the program will continue in the Caribbean, but there is no guarantees.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bowman. Is there a need for further discussion on this? It's another round. Nay. One question, Council Lady Spanner.
Mr. Bowman, you mentioned that there was an attempt to steal our lizards. Can this be prevented? How is there anything that can be done? I mean, anyone can come in and just take our basically vulnerable species. Is that possible?
We need a much stronger legal framework when it comes to collection of native species. That would help tremendously. However, we do have, and that is lacking today, I must say. We can prevent it, but it is much more difficult than it should be. However, I must say that we have a great collaboration with hereby on this, but also with the national authorities, the regional authorities, Coast Guard, etc. So the collaboration is there, but a stronger legal framework would definitely help.
I can follow. That's it, Council Lady. So on this issue of the lizard, so where was that detected that someone was trying to take these out of the island? Is it at the airport?
We had an individual on the island which was involved in a public incident. So the name of this individual was known. By this public incident, we were alerted by regional authorities from Barbados that this individual had been involved in animal smuggling previously. And from there, we discussed this with immigration, for example, and alerted them that if you see this individual, however, the way we caught this individual was literally he walked by the Stenapa office and we recognized him. From there we alerted authorities, and when they searched him they found up to I think 76 live native lizards which he had collected on the island, and we know that that was not the first time.
Okay, so legal framework, but also some detective work needed on the island as well. All right, I think you covered all the questions. There's no need for further deliberation. So we thank you, Mr. Bowman, for your presentation. And to the committee members, that we can forward. Now, this is just a presentation, so this does not need to go to the Island Council, I suspect. Okay. All right, so that concludes agenda point number 7. And final, not final, but next agenda point is Environment Ordinance. So this agenda point concerns the Island Ordinance. It further elaborates the environmental regulations for businesses on St. Eustatius. The development of this ordinance fulfills the obligation to establish local regulations while also taking into account the ambitions and policy objectives of the island. The ordinance follows from the entry into force of the Best Establishments and Activities Decree, which requires the island to further define environmental rules for establishments and activities at the local level. We will have a presentation by the unit manager, unit licenses. And before that, we give the commissioner the opportunity to provide some additional context to this agenda point. Commissioner Merkman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Introduction. For several years now, the IEB the Establishment and Activities Decree BEST was a topic that was constantly brought to the table to the BEST Islands. In short, that decree applies to businesses and organizations in Bonilla, Statia, and Saba to protect local ecosystems and vulnerable coral reefs, as was just mentioned by the Director of SINAPA, Mr. Bowman. With this decree, it is hoped that it will provide more protection for our nature. For clarity purposes, the IEB categorized businesses by environmental impact, requiring notifications, permits, or tailored rules for higher impact operations, while imposing a general duty of care to minimize harm. For example, when you have a garage, a company, the soil protection measures to prevent or limit soil contamination by a drip tray, protective flooring, or another leak-proof provision. Those are some of the things that are in this ordinance. Order nuisance at restaurants. To prevent or minimize odor nuisance based on Article 16.2, my apologies, of the Island Ordinance Environment 2026. Therefore, approving this ordinance ensures sustainable business practices, safeguards the island's unique habitats and vital safeguards the island's unique habitats, vital, and supports long-term economic growth, which ties in with the purpose of unit licensing, supervision, and enforcement, to provide permits to the citizens and companies of St. Eustatius regarding economy, nature, and infrastructure, meanwhile enforcing and supervising that respected compliances are met. Hence, Article 5.1 of the Act states, rules shall be established that are required to protect the environment from the adverse effects that these establishments, these businesses may cause. Ultimately, by approving this island ordinance, the statutory duty is fulfilled. It is also important because it makes the rules for companies more concrete and verifiable. I would like to now, with your indulgence, Council, invite the manager of VTR, Mr. Maynard, to present the respected ordinance. Thank you.
Now the Council, the Chairman will indulge you. Thank you, Commissioner Merkman. Mr. Maynard, you may now make your presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. This afternoon, I will be giving a presentation as it relates to inrichtingen en activiteiten BES besluit, IAB BES, establishment and activities decree BES. So this right here is basically the Eilandsverordening Milieuactiviteiten inrichting 2026, Island Ordinance on Environmental Activities and Establishment. Okay, back. So for today, I'll be conducting the following table of conduct. I'll start with a background history to ensure that everyone is fully aware and familiar that what transpired and how we reach here today. I'll give an introduction to the IAB BES, then I'll specify on the business categories based on the services and products that are actually provided. And then we'll touch base on why is it important to actually implement the ordinance. Then we go to a quick island ordinance overview. Furthermore, I point out the island ordinance itself. Before the last point, I'll go to the roles, and then, of course, we have the round table whereby the questions may be asked. So I'll start first with a background history. So basically since 1993, the nuance ordinance is a regulatory framework to limit and or prevent nuisance, danger, and declining of the living environment due to business activities. So back then it was a hindering verordening. And then as of 10-10-10, the new establishment took place where the best public housing, spatial planning, and environmental management act was in place. This is where we have the VROM-BES familiar. Everyone is familiar to the name more often. In February 2012, the effect of the BES, Public Housing, Spatial Planning and Environmental Management Act, the VROM-BES, that actually went in full effect. So 2010 is when they established it. 2012, they went exactly into full implementation mode. And then the ordinance, the hindering ordering, actually stayed at that moment as well until a ministerial regulation was established. From 2019 to 2021, that's when they tried to actually implement the IAB BES. However, they did have some certain challenges on the islands. For example, in certain islands, maybe you didn't have a director, or you didn't have no inspector, or you didn't have a manager as well. And then as of April 1st, 2024, that's when the IAB BES went in full effect. And it substituted the hindering verordening. And at this moment, we're in 2026, and now the ordinance is pending. Now I'll go through exactly a short briefing from the introduction. I'll start with the IAB BES is the manner in which environmental laws, rules, regulations, and ordinances are enforced within the companies of the BES Islands, meanwhile focusing on protecting the living environment with the greater purpose of creating a more safer and healthier environment for all. So basically, when we move to the part was say, essentially the services and products from administrative services to consumption-based items and or machines and capacities from small machineries to gigantic tanks. All these components distinguishes which categories the companies are aligned to. Right here we have actually a table. The table actually outlines how exactly the companies are divided based on the category types. We have category type 1 to type 4. So then the type 1 is mainly the smaller companies, and then the type 4, of course, are the larger companies. So then when we talk about the type 1 companies, we can basically think about offices. And then if we talk about the type 2 companies, we can talk about catering and garages. And the type 3 companies are product manufacturers. Now the competent authority for type 1 to type 3 is the OLE. They are the competent authority for that. and the type 4 is from the ministry. They are the competent authority for the type 4. And basically, based on the offices in the law states that no notification have to be placed for the type 1. The type 2 have to do notification. So notification is basically letting them assign to the environmental aspect. It's a digital form that have to be filled in by the companies, and it will be received to the respected unit, to unit VTH. And then we have product manufacturer, which is apply for the licenses. So based off of what services you're doing and exactly the harm or the danger you're doing as well, you will have to apply for the license for that, as it relates to the type 3, and the type 4 is supervised and enforced by the ministry. Now I have why is this important, or why exactly is the island ordinance for this environment important? Lower influence towards surrounding water, improvement of the groundwater quality, better handling of waste, and this has a positive impact on wastewater quality and therefore the protection of reefs, sea life in general, which in hindsight significantly contributes to the NEP. We just had a presentation whereby some information over the NEP was presented, and this actually complements with the NEP. Approval of this island ordinance is necessary for several reasons. Specifying the detailed rules on the quality criteria for the business, compliance to the law and other regulation, positive impact on the image of St. Eustatius as an eco-destination for hikers, divers, and visitors, more support from ministries, ODNL, and other affiliated organizations, health benefits as well as it relates to pollutions. So the more you mitigate the pollutions, the better and the healthier it is. By reducing pollution and promoting clean energy, eco-sustainability laws can improve public health by decreasing the illness and harmful diseases. Resilience to the environmental disaster, better prepared for natural disaster. Right here I have an entire overview of just the information with the changes that the hereby best actually focus on. So I have from the 3-compartment septic all the way down to the storage fire resistance as well. So that's one of the major parts that is embedded into the hereby best. And they also point out many other stuff depending on the companies. Certain aspects will be applicable to your company. For example, garages will have to have, like for example, liquid floor, or guaranteed they have the drip pan to ensure that we don't have any soil pollution. We also have waste separation is a big component of it. Furthermore, wastewater as well. Another important point from this part is exactly when they're actually assisting as it relates to noise limit reduction, because if everyone is aware, we have the similar is cited from the APV as well. Now I reach to the part where we have the Island voor Ordnungsmilieu Activiteiten Inrichtingen 2026, Island Ordinance on Environmental Activities on the Establishments. So basically it's divided between chapter 1 to chapter 22, and it's a lot more easier to follow the way how it is prepared. So chapter 1 of general provisions, and we have the abbreviations, so they have a lot of terminologies that take place to ensure that everyone is familiar with it. We have management of raw materials, so thinking about when we have to reuse sand or water, we try to reuse as much as possible if it can be used, and not that you consider it as waste. Then we reach to waste management, keeping the site clean and dispose waste as much as possible. that's also to avoid other pollutions which will be coming up shortly. We have wastewater management, discharging water criteria, volumes, and septic tanks. So basically on this part as well, they have a criteria in which if you want to dispose of the water, discharge the water on the ground, you have to reach a certain criteria to ensure that it does not contaminate or pollute the ground. Then we have management of soil protection. Of course, we're talking about protection, prevention, and controls of the soil of the businesses. Then light, we have light pollution as well, prevention and limitation of light nuisance to ensure that at all times you don't overuse the purpose of the light as well. And we have, similar to the APV that cited the noise limit values. So we have 7 to 7, so 7 in the morning to 7 in the afternoon. Then we have 7 in the afternoon, or 7 in the evening to 11 p.m. Then we have 11 p.m. to 7. And then the decibel also go down per segment by 5 decibel. And then also depending on the area and what work it is, it falls under a different category as well. Then we have storage of dangerous substances in packaging. We could think about items, amount, volume, and storage. All of those will play a role specifically to put which category you can fall under, especially based on the volume. And then we have Chapter 9, which is storage of the ground-threatening liquids in tanks, in tank containers. So basically from tank containers, they have certain things where you should, or certain items that you should be a lot more safe. You should be more safe with to ensure that it does not harm or cause any fumes as well. And then we have storage gases in storage tank, applicable distance and maximization. 11, we have storage and sale of consumer fireworks, the scopes, the sale notification, and how exactly that would take place and how it should be stored as well. Then we have the delivery, which is Chapter 12, delivery of liquid fuels. Then we have the scope protection, and of course one of the major important stuff is the emergency stuff while carrying such items. Chapter 13, maintaining and repairing combustion engine, motorized vehicles, vessels, or machinery. Chapter 14, we have discussions about the cleaning of motor vehicle, tools, cleaning, maintenance, repairing, and painting of vessel. And management of pool is Chapter 15. And then Chapter 16 have a small section preparing with food as well, the scope, safety, how you do it, and how it should be placed. And we have the mechanical processing of stone rubbles as well. Safety limits, we have the distance guidelines, all of that is stipulated. We have the welding as well. So we have welding and soldering. So welding is basically when you use the two base form to actually merge together. We're talking about over 10,000 Fahrenheit for it to be merged. And then the one for soldering is when you take a small little part to patch it. So that's around 840 Fahrenheit. Then we move over to mechanical finishing of metals. So you try your best to use as much material as possible without conducting any soil pollution. And then, of course, you could use it with dry cleaning reuse to diffuse emissions for the gas and the air. Then laboratory also have their own distinction with the scope, handling, prevention, discharge, and emission, because they work with a lot of liquids and substances that may be dangerous for the company. Then we have final provision. The Island Ordinance comes into effect, we are hoping for on April 2nd, 2026, and is cited as an Island Ordinance Activities Establishment 2026. Now, before I actually continue to the next slide, I would like to give some extra information as it relates to the observation, what's taking place in Statia, and actually the supervision and enforcement. While we started with it, from last year to now, we did see that many businesses actually reach to the standards that is required. At this moment, there are minor implications that needs to take place aside for the septic for the wastewater, and that's an important point as well, because that's actually pushed to 2029 based on the laws that was implemented and used as well. So now we actually move over to the roles, so to make it clear cut so everyone could fully understand. So the ministry is actually legislation of all processes. Public entity is in charge of competent authority of type 1 to 3. Omgevingsdienst, I actually have a member here at the moment that actually assists when it comes to supervision and enforcement. I brought him alongside with me, Mr. Joey Waver. We actually have assistance from Omgevingsdienst as it relates to inspection, understanding the permits and how that go. Then Omgevingsdienst also assists with, as it relates to training, setting up different procedures, the understanding of permitting process and how things should be executed. Then Rijkswaterstaat role is permitting competent authority of category 4, and then inspection and enforcement category 4 from the seaside, assistant on implementation, website, infomail, and projects. And then for more information, we have the website www.infomailcn.nl, and there whereby you can gather as much information as possible. And then based off of all the information, I will be awaiting any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maynard. All right, so we will go into the discussion on this agenda point, the environmental ordinance. Okay, same procedure. If there's no suggestion for different time, we will stick to the regular speaking time. And following the round, and you, Mr. Maynard, can answer the questions posed. So we'll start again with Councilman Simmons in the first round of this agenda point.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, a lot of information. But I will ask certain specific question. For example, you mentioned about the septic tank, which has to do with the water going into the ground. I saw where in the proposed ordering, you have mentioned a certain build of the septic tank with 3 compartments. My question is, because I guess it based also on different categories of whether it's a dwelling or business, whatever. It is mentioned the word, like, if you have a dwelling that is more than 6, you need a different type of cesspool, a septic tank. How did they come to the number 6? Why not 5 or 10? You know, how did it come to 6? And also looking at the island we live on. Basically, we are a volcanic island. And after receiving this document, I did some research. And I came out with this online, that the absolute best rock for water purification are porous volcanic rocks, particularly zeolites and volcanic and volcanic tuff. So basically, the island is like one gigantic filter. When you look at like say comparing Statia with Curacao, there's a big difference, and how you deal with what do you call it, gray water or waste. And my question is, because when you look at the amount of like information or what like a business or whatever need to comply with, my question is, sometimes isn't it over doing it? Seeing that to comply, and the more you have to do, will have to do with putting things in place. Like I guess eventually they have to, the waste plant will have to also comply with how do they deal with what's happening. Because right now, I think you notice every so much week, well, I notice it, particularly I think it was earlier this week, when passing the auxiliary home, you notice there is a big problem with waste. You could even smell it. And I was wondering eventually what's going to happen with that situation, or it's going to remain the same. And the question that always come to mind is, why are you pumping, like say, just wastewater, where basically, to me, the ground can deal with that situation in an efficient way. And to end it, there is a section about the sound, the amount of decibels. And when I look at the different categories, I downloaded an app and sort of tried to get in perspective what the measurements are. And when I look at the lower measurement, 50 decibels, it say is like a quiet environment, office space. And my question and my concern is, we are living on an island that has, to me, a lot of natural noise. For example, if you go up in the mountains, some people don't realize how noisy it is. But if you're not used to that sound, I don't think you would be able to sleep, because it's very noisy. And to me, if you measure the sound, to me, you'll pass the compliant amount, or based on the table, or maybe I'm seeing it the wrong way. And my question is, when measuring the sound, do you take into consideration the natural background noise? For example, you're in a place where, to me, you done pass the limit, and you're going to set up a business or live there, and you producing a little bit, you turn on your TV, and you have the inspector breaking down your door saying, listen, you are non-compliant. So I'm just saying, to be, reasonable, sometimes you have to take the natural noise into consideration. And the question is when you look at this table, is that taken into account, or is just, listen, this is the limit, and if you surpass that noise, then something needs to be done? Because what I'm afraid of, if you take that kind of approach, then the same kind of nature that you're trying to protect probably will be in danger, because they are too noisy. And so basically my question is in line with that. And also you have, when you look at, for example, areas like around Zealandia, where you live in sort of I call it like an echo chamber. What happens when the noise that are being made is amplified because you have a sort of echo? So is all those things taken into consideration, or it just if you implement the ordinance, those are things that basically businesses or dwelling apartments, hotels need to deal with and make sure that what they're doing is soundproof. Yeah, that is basically it.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Simmons. Council Lady Spanakati.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Maynard, for your presentation. On page 2 of the ordinance by Beheer van Afvalstoffen, I was wondering how this relates to our experience often when transporting goods, such as we know of the bay with the sand, concrete trucks, they leave a lot of mess behind. Does this regulation or this ordinance tackle issues such as that? I had a similar question to Councilman Simmons regarding measuring noise in areas that are already noisy. When it comes to Article 7, Zealandia, by Stuco in the area, it is already a noisy area, so how do you measure, and do we have the proper equipment? Because you mentioned implementation in the next month. Chapter 14, I noticed there is no transition period mentioned in your ordinance. How much time will businesses get to comply if they're already existing? You mentioned that you already, most are already in compliance, which I find strange if this is new. I would hope that we were not forcing people to do something that was not yet regulated by law. You mentioned during your presentation that something was pushed to 2029. I was not, I didn't understand you clearly what exactly was pushed. On page 6 of your presentation, you have off-courting ODNL. If you could please specify what it was off-courting for. I find the enforcement of this ordinance quite vast. I know we have small teams. I was wondering how many FTE are you looking at to carry out this? And quite honestly, I'm wondering if it isn't too ambitious. Also, I was wondering, because our community is going to be hit hard with this ordinance, especially when we really start to enforce it. At what point can people distinguish between what is a business and when people are maybe cooking at home for food sale, which also, if requirements are not met and there is a hygiene issue, it would also affect a large part of our community. Again, same line of questioning, how do I distinguish whether I'm considered compliant or not? Can I fix my car at home? I have 2 cars at home. Can I fix them there? At what point am I a business or am I non-compliant? Also, my last question, your ordinance does not have any implementation guidelines, compliance timelines, inspection protocols, or transitional arrangements, which I already mentioned. Is there a reason they're not included? Do you have an addendum? Or, yeah. But that is it for now.
Thank you, Council Lady Spanakati. Okay, I have two questions, I think. With respect to the agreement with, I think the government signed an agreement recently with the omgevingsdienst. Was that agreement, for the commissioner maybe, was that agreement sent to the Island Council so we can see what the contents of that agreement is? I'm also wondering the inspections with respect to this ordinance. Do you require special inspectors to do this, or is your department going to be doing all the inspections? I guess you're going to have perhaps assistance from someone from the Netherlands through the omgevingsdienst. What is their role in doing the various inspections? I guess this ordinance too is I think I heard you say that most businesses right now are basically complying with a lot of requirements. So I guess there's a ordinance or something in place already now that folks have to comply with, or is this something totally new? So can you explain how this is going to change what is already in existence? But my main question is about the omgevingsdienst agreement and the inspections. Who's going to be carrying out these inspections, and on what basis? Is it, I guess, in the permits that companies or businesses have, there's a stipulation when inspections have to be done, whether on an annual basis or when the license has to be renewed, etc. So if you can just give some information with respect to that. Thank you. Okay, so you can go ahead now and answer the questions posed by the members in this first round.
Okay, good. For the first one that regards to Mr. Simmons' questions, I will let a member from the omgevingsdienst answer, and that was one of Ms. Spanner's questions. ODNL, look, it's on the board. ODNL, yes, ODNL, Omgevingsdienst Nederlands. So I'll let Mr. Joey Weyer answer that question. No, yeah.
have to stand?
Yeah. And,
So, well, good afternoon, members of the committee. Thank you for having me here. My name is Joey Weyer. Back in the Netherlands, I'm a legal advisor. I work for Omgevingsdienst Netherlands. This is the third time I'm visiting Stacia. I'm very thankful for that. What we do from the Omgevingsdienst is supporting team licenses with their task on enforcement, permits, and well, also learning on the job, I would say. We visited companies. We visited together with environmental inspectors. We visited the Category 3 permit companies. We were visiting the Category 2 companies. And this is why the island ordinance is so important. I understand the questions you asked, and first of all, sorry, my English is not very good, so I will try to do my best. There are some questions and I would like to answer that, but before, I think it's important to understand what this island ordinance now actually is, because in the IAB-BES, the Establishment and Activity Degree, and in the Regulation on Establishment and Activities BES, there are all specific rules companies has to comply with. And what this ordinance is nothing more than building in this frame of regulation concrete and verifiable rules to make it specific. So, for example, when we visited a garage company, they have soil protection facilities. They work above concrete floors, and they work with all sorts of substances that are very hazardous to the soil, such as oil, coolant, cleaning agents, etc. So when they clean up, it washes down the road from the concrete floors and it gets into the soil. So what the regulations say is, it's not the activiteit of the regulation is saying, when you have wastewater, you cannot discharge this into the soil or into the ocean. This only you only may do this if you clean the water, for example by, what is the name again? Cleaning facility? No? Yeah, purifier, water treatment system, yeah. And also for garage companies, for example, this also means they need to install a sludge strip and oil separator. Okay, this is what the regulation is saying. You need to do a sludge strip and oil separator and a wastewater treatment facility. You have to comply as a company. So what does the ordinance do? This gives you to specify what needs to be done there. So if you look, for example, an example of a water purifier is a septic tank. So what you do as the Island Council is make it clear for the businesses, but also for the environmental inspectors, how to check on these, what needs to be done. So it makes it easier to monitor and enforce compliance. It doesn't add extra rules to what is already existing. It only specifies what needs to be done. And then maybe it's easier to understand why, because, I can't write my own hand. Okay, let's look at the questions of Mr. Simmons. He was first, right? Answers fashion. Yeah, I cannot answer why 6 equivalent wastewater. I'm not sure. I think this was made also with the support of IoT. We draw these rules up, and of course a lot of these rules are copied for what's existing, for example, in the Netherlands, but can be used as well here on the islands of the station. But what you see over there in the rules, for example, if you look at septic tank, it says in Article 4.3 that the setup of this tank needs to be done in accordance to, and I wrote this word down because I can't remember it. It says the NEN N12566/1. And this is the, how do you call this again?
It's a standard.
Yeah, it's a standard. It's got a lot of information on it, which an inspector can use to monitor if the septic tank is working properly. So then again, this island ordinance doesn't add new rules, but it specifies the existing rules, and therefore it's very important that it comes into act as soon as possible. And it also doesn't mean, because in question one, aren't we too ambitious? Aren't we going too fast with implementing this? I would say no, because you already have the rules you have to monitor and enforce. This only helps to specify it. It makes it easier for business entrepreneurs, and it makes it easier also for unit licenses and you can change whatever you want, but please implement it in this April, and then look how it is working, and then change what needs to be changed later on, because you can change this every year if you want to. For example, there are some rules about sound. There was a question also about if they rekening houden met surrounding sounds. Well, if you look back then in the regulation, it says you cannot make noise pollution, But what that is a question mark, and here it's specified what it is. It's also specified how to measure volgens de HRM 99 handleiding rekenen, meten, industrielawaai. So then you have very concrete norms to measure, to calculate if there is noise pollution and if there is a violation of noise pollution. It doesn't necessarily means that if this comes into act, we're going to measure everywhere. No, this is up to the commissioner and the governor to decide, because you give him the instruction how to enforce and how to monitor all the specific regulation for the companies. So. And to answer your question, sir, yes, in the handleiding rekenen, meten, industrielawaai, it's specified what needs to be, with which sounds you need to calculate, which corrections you have to make, also weather is in this. And if you're going back to the other questions, are we ready, aren't we too ambitious? The two environmental inspectors visited the Netherlands for courses and training, and they also learned how to measure noise. It's not like you can pull out a mobile phone and measure the noise pollution. This is specific equipment you need, specific knowledge you need, but the our inspectors of Statia are trained for that one. Okay, this is a lot of information, but and I hope most of the questions for now are answered. But then again, I would
And fill in the rest. That's
yeah, but it would be really helpful and really nice. To just implement it. Then you also fulfill your statutory duty, because it's in Article 5.1 of the Act that stipulates the Island Council needs to make an ordinance. It will help very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Give me my laptop.
Okay, good. As it relates to Councilman Simmons' questions with the 6 meters and so on, we actually had different stakeholders that played a role into this as well. So it was not only that they just draft up something. The first one, what they actually sent, and I reviewed it, I tell them no way, because the way how it was spread up, it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was like 8 meters left to right. And I tell them that can't work in Statia, because nowhere you could actually have space was 8 meters. We're talking about that's roughly 24 feet. Where in the world we will have that in any establishment in Statia to have that kind of room? So I tell them, no, we have to revise it to something that's actually more practical and feasible to Statia. So I sat down here with myself, 2 other people from Statia and 2 people from the ministries as well, to ensure that it's somewhat manageable, and if changes need to be made, that can be made accordingly. As it relates to the other question with the noise pollution, Mr. Wade pointed out that yes, we do take into account the different factors of the surrounding and how those are set up, but also this is also cited from the APV, something that's already embedded into OLE. It's not that we take something new, we just cited something that's already in a previous ordinance. So when you hand over the whole ordinance, everyone is fully aware of what took place and they can fully understand it. Then we move to some of the Commissioner Island Council, Ms. Spanner, you mentioned about when it comes to the transport, the companies, not the drivers, but the companies that's be approached on how they're transporting stuff. And depending on the category, it's a lot more stricter. We have companies right here on the island that had to send documentation on way more stuff, even from 2021, from different stuff, and they have to keep track of it. And within, depending if they're a type 3, which is the larger scale company, then they have to log it. So then we can control how they're actually processing, bring in the waste, and how they log it as well. So those are other aspects. We mentioned about training. Yes, training took place last year, August, and ERB BEST officially started from as of April 1st 2024. From then on, a plan was already made. And then one of the points actually what that was mentioned is about the implementation. The implementation is already set in the VROMBES, the highest act that we're actually following through. So we're just applying what the highest act have, and we're just more or less using it in the island ordinance for better guidelines and precisions. Yeah, where's the compartment? Food. Another question was with regards to food sale. Those who are doing food from home, they need to have their health card, the food safety card. That's a mandatory statement. They just can't come start businesses. Because what's happening now, if we leave it as is, some people are not paying taxes and those kind of stuff. And we will bring an imbalance, and we're trying to avoid that as much as possible. So that's why those who are using food have to apply for not only their business license, because it's a big misconception thinking if they have the food safety card, they can just do anything. No, you still have to apply for a business license. Or you could take the other route in applying for an event. And so some people at this moment, we had many comments from the public as well. They mentioned that, hey, but I already have my food safety card, but you don't have your business license. Food safety card it only implies that you can handle food, not run a business. That's two complete different components. Okay, we mentioned about the car fix. Moreover, another point was with the car fix operations. If a household is fixing their cars, that's not considered a business. A business is a lot more when it's into operation as much as possible. In many cases, if you have 7, 8, 15 cars, for example, you can't tell me it's your house. You can't tell me, oh yes, this is, no, this is considered business. You have to apply for licenses. I know that in the past that many stuff like that did not take place. We're somewhat working, try to rectify things. But then there's two different things as well when you have to pay attention with. When a new law come into place and you're trying to force, they will always have a gap or gray area. So those are stuff that we're actually sifting through. Not that everyone could actually have 2 cars and things. But I do understand your point. Then we move to... Who's the last person? Mr. Commissioner, Council. I'm not so familiar with Councilman Mr. Smith. Chairman, Sir Chairman. I'm not so familiar with that. So basically what takes place is our workers are not only trained when they went to Holland and get certificate in that, but we also have as much as possible on-the-job training. That's why Mr. Weyer is here to ensure that the compliances are subsequently met to the standards that what we're reaching to. Yes, it may seem that the ordinance feel like it rushed, but this is something that we started from since 2024. And if we look back in history, it started more or less 2013. So as time, it's not that we're going in to force people get this, everything done. We're also working with measures that are more or less the best practical, the best available techniques as well. For example, they could have different safety issues if you have 3 different gas cylinders next to one another. And we could advise, hey, listen here, if you want that, you have to store it with a storage around it, so it have to be enclosed, but we tell them, no, when you need it, you could bring it, so then you have the 2 others in another location whereby you don't have to have all the hazardous goods in one spot. And yes, and then the machine exactly is a type 2 noise limitation value reader. So that's what they were trained in when it comes to measuring the sound, basically, and they do take into account different measures. What they take into account, not only they take into account the wind, which direction the wind actually plays a role as well. They take account into what they have around the surroundings. So those are just a mere aspects that actually contributes to the measuring of the sound values. I believe I mentioned all the questions. If you have any more, please feel free to ask.
All right, thank you, Mr. Maynard. The members, anyone has additional questions, if we need an additional round? Council Lady Spanner, Carty.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to clarify, I didn't quite get an answer on the amount of FTEs, if what you have right now is sufficient. And when I mentioned the transport, I appreciate that big companies have plans, etc. in place. This is something that I have seen with my own eyes. They overfull their trucks, then they dirty our roads, they don't clean up their mess, and that leads to more erosion. When it rains, there's more sand running down the street, and it can also lead to accidents. This makes the road more slippery when you have sand for our bikers, etc. So what I mean is you need your people ter plekke when they are moving this stuff. So do you have enough people to really enforce this?
Go ahead. Go ahead then.
Okay, as it relates at this moment, how we're monitoring it, we don't per se need one at this moment based off of the limitation of the space of the business where we're staying at this moment. So then later on in the future, it can come by that we will need more. But what we do have is always support with extra assistance. So that's why we monitor it in a phase. For example, Mr. Wayard is here, but actually he's here for 3 weeks, but we have someone else coming in next week. So then it's 5 weeks basically of extra assistance, and then we'll plan a next visit for when we come in again. And the way how we actually separated the timeline on which business we're going to tackle or approach first, we used the inverted pyramid, which means we dealt with the most highest environmental issues first, and then the lower ones. So then all the ones with the biggest environmental aspects, you could say, that contributes to the society, those are the first one we targeted to ensure that it will have a proper balance. I'm not so sure. But then for the additional FTE, I can get back to you when I monitor it. But as for now, it's going according to plan. But I can say from my estimation, based off of how things going, after next year, most likely yes.
May I add something?
Yes.
Do I need to stand?
Yeah.
Thank you. You were talking about a specific case that's annoying you, that's polluting the roads and everything. And what you are actually asking is unit license and enforcement do something about it, start enforcement on it. And this is what the Island Ordinance is all about. These are the instruments that the environmental inspectors need to do their work properly. It contributes to becoming a more professionalized organization. This is what I would like to add. What may not thought. Well, answer this as well.
Okay.
Yeah, it also depends on the policy you want to voeren. If you say we need to start enforcement on every violation, yeah, of course you need more inspectors, more legal advisors, because you're going to start more cases. And this is possible if you want to, because we visited a lot of companies already. And in the Great Range, they're all working very hard. They're trying to do their best. But if you want to, we can draw up violation by violation with wastewater. The list goes on. So you're at the starting point of becoming a more professionalizing organization with enforcement, with licenses and everything.
Just for clarity, it isn't that I'm looking forward to being disgusting and writing violations. My issue is the fact that we come up with these ordinances for a reason. I remember as a council, we also passed seat belts, helmets, especially we had a very tragic accident here. And after that, there was a period that everybody had them on, and gradually we forgot again. My point is, as a government, we look jokey when we put ordinances in place and then we don't enforce them. So I think on paper it is very pretty, but it matters not if we don't enforce it.
Yeah, no comment. Okay, I have a follow-up question on that. For example, we have regular transport, say from the barge when they bring in sand and stone and cement and all those kind of things. Do those businesses notify you that we're going to be doing transport of materials from the bay to their establishment? Do you get any prior notification so that you can send someone to keep an eye on what is happening? Maybe with the garbage and so it's more difficult. People move waste material from one place to the next randomly, but do you require some kind of notification in some of these situations?
As it relates to the point that you mentioned moments ago, that's a fair point. I must agree. So if it comes to transportation, we can notify the companies, those who are specifically dealing with those wastes. And last year, we did publish twice, I could remember from the top of my head, about that same concern about when you're transporting goods, you should have the correct material over it so you do not cause any, issues with the road for someone who's driving or not. So that, we had to notice last year about that. But a fair point taken, I could take that into consideration and I could see how best we can have a feasible solution in a quick span.
You answered my question too?
Oh.
Yeah, that was yours.
That was yours?
That was yours. That's
Okay.
look into it.
Thought you were still okay. All right, that's it. Nothing else from you? Nothing else from the council? Okay. All right, thank you for the information.
You're utmost welcome. Thank you once again, everyone.
Thank you. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
All right, we thank the commissioner, the unit manager, unit licenses, Mr. Maynard, for his presentation on the environmental ordinance. And I ask the committee if we can forward this to the Island Council for further handling. Yeah. All right, so we will send this on to the Island Council. Okay, agenda point number 9, announcements, Executive Council. Any announcements from the Executive Council?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, at this time, Commissioner of Agriculture, Environment, E&I is off island. She's in the Netherlands. She had to attend a EU meeting. And yeah, that's probably the only announcement that we have at this time.
All right, thank you. Then we bring this meeting for the Central Committee for today, March 19, to a close. I want to thank all participants and their teams for their presentations and active engagement during the meeting. Also extend gratitude to the Central Committee members, technical team for their support, and to everyone who followed us via radio, Facebook, and other online means. With that, I officially close this meeting, and thank you for joining us.